I'm David Lombardo, and you're listening to WCNY's The Capitol Press Room. During the 2026 legislative session in Albany, Democratic state lawmakers pushed through a bill that they argue will add accountability and fairness to arbitration proceedings at a time when more and more contracts for goods and services require consumers to agree to binding mandatory arbitration, which are often handled by third parties that may have a financial incentive in ruling in the business's favor, since they're the ones often paying for the services. For more on the issue, we're joined by the measure's assembly sponsor, Bronx Democrat Jeffrey Dinowitz. Welcome back to the show, Assemblymember.
Good to be here again.
Well, from your perspective, what is it about the current system that puts ordinary New Yorkers at a disadvantage when entering into binding arbitration with potentially a large company?
Well, first let me say that there is a time and a place for arbitration. Those who would advocate for arbitration would say that without it, the courts would be so clogged up, backed up, and nothing would get done. And that's correct. However, there are many concerns that have been raised by the way the system works now, and we want to make sure there's a level playing field. A situation where, 90% of the time, or some huge number, one side tends to win, is not a level playing field. So at least we want to make sure there's transparency and accountability of arbitration organizations, specifically the ones that deal with 50 or more cases a year. And that's what it's about. Who can be against transparency and accountability? Well, I guess I know who can be against it by who voted against it, but you shouldn't be against it.
Yeah, I think about 50 or so of your colleagues, mostly Republicans, voted against this. But in terms of what this actually would look like, what are the rules and regulations that you think would make a difference in leveling the playing field, so to speak?
Well, we want consumers to have access to information, and there's a whole host of types of information that would have to be put into a database. And now I'm just looking at this laundry list. The name of the non-consumer party, the address, zip code, stuff like that, the type of dispute that involved, whether the consumer was the prevailing party, the number of occasions that the non-consumer party has been in an arbitration mediated by a private arbitration organization, the dates involved, the amount of the claim and the award, and the name of the arbitrator and their fee. So all this information doesn't affect how a case will be decided in the future, but it does give a consumer certain information that they may want to, have available to them. So again, it's about openness, transparency.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like this type of legislation, this data collection effort, is sort of the first step toward future action, because with additional data, I imagine state policymakers like yourself could look at the field and say, hey, these mandatory arbitrations are not working out for consumers. They're losing, as you said earlier, 90% of the time. So is there a reasonable expectation that with this data, you might take additional action in the future?
Well, I think we should always look at information that we have available in order to determine what potential policy changes, what potential legislation we should pass. But it's clear that the overwhelming majority of cases are decided on one side. And of course, a lot of people think that there's an unhealthy relationship between, the businesses and the arbitrators. I'm not saying the arbitrators are not acting fairly, but the fact is many of the arbitrators are like known quantities and who are dealt with repeatedly. The consumers don't deal with them repeatedly, only the businesses do. So we just want to make sure things are done fairly. There has to be balance. Balance on the one hand, you don't want every case ending up in court, but on the other hand, you don't want people, getting screwed all the time. The fact is so many contracts have mandatory arbitration clauses, and it means that the consumer all too often is put in a very bad situation to start with.
Well, you referred to that relationship between those third parties that oversee a lot of the arbitrations for certain companies. And under the existing model, the bill memo notes that those third parties may have a financial interest in ruling in the favor of the client that's hired them if they want to keep getting that business. So is that something that this bill addresses, removing that possibly perverse incentive to rule one way or another? Or is that something that you would want to tackle down the road?
Well, one of the things that would be in the database is the name of the arbitrator and the arbitrator's total fee for the case and the percentage of the fee allocated to the party, as well, of course, as the amount of the claim, the award, relief, or settlement granted. I bet that we will find that there all too often is, I guess, an incentive to kind of not be as neutral as you should be. I'm not saying all arbitrators are neutral. I just want to make clear that. But I think the way it's set up, the little guy, which is really all of us consumers, are at a disadvantage. And we just want to make it fair for everybody, including both sides, fair for everybody.
And in terms of how this data might be utilized, do you expect consumers to be scouring this searchable database for information, or is it more likely that this is going to be a tool for consumer advocacy groups?
Well, I think it could be both. Certainly, consumer advocates would want to, have, look at this information, but there are a lot of things that individual consumers, they go online to get information on one thing or another. And this could be one of those things. If the information is available and they don't look at it, well, they don't look at it. But some people will look at it, hopefully a lot of people, and that'll strengthen their ability to get a fair shake, I think.
And in terms of that broader question about the utilization of binding arbitration, something that most consumers just click through and agree to with the latest terms of service for whatever good or service, often online, that they're utilizing. Are there additional guardrails that you think make sense in terms of making people aware of what they've just clicked on, or limiting the use of arbitration moving forward? Or is it unreasonable to make any big changes to that, given in part how crowded and overwhelmed our court system is already?
Well, I do think when you're looking through a contract or a proposed contract, there's a lot of information. Most people just go to the bottom and click it because they assume it's standard, boilerplate, no big deal type stuff. But the fact is, it does pay to read these things. Now, I've had a number of bills relating to arbitration, one of which was a very simple thing, that the part of the contract where it says that mandatory arbitration should be in a larger font size. A larger font size to specifically make people aware that when they're signing something, that they're agreeing to submit themselves to mandatory arbitration if it comes down to it. And if you can believe it, there was opposition to that in the assembly on one side of the aisle, of course. And it's like, really? What do you think, that having a 16-point font instead of a 12-point or a 10-point font is going to cost the company more money in ink? Why would anybody oppose that? And the answer is because either you're for the consumer or you're against the consumer.
And at the same time, though, if you're a consumer who wants to utilize a product and you don't want to agree to binding arbitration, then you're kind of shut out from using these products to begin with, which you maybe need for your day-to-day life, given how online everyone is.
That can certainly be the case. And, it's not only in consumer, this bill's, focuses in a certain area, but there are other types of contracts that can involve mandatory arbitration clauses. I mean, for example, when I first got involved with this issue, I learned that if you are, if your parent, let's say, is going to be going into a nursing home, the contracts that have to be signed there also involve mandatory arbitration clauses, and so many other areas. I'm just pointing out that one specific. And usually there's very little choice. That's the problem. There's very little choice. Either you sign it or you're out of luck. But at least if you're going to sign such a clause, you at least want to make sure everything is fair.
Well, you noted that this legislation applies to organizations involved in a lot of arbitrations in the past, but it does exclude those agreements negotiated with any labor union through collective bargaining. What's the interest in not collecting data there as well?
Well, the reason it excludes it is you actually said it. It's because those kind of agreements are done through collective bargaining, where you basically have two equal sides, so to
Hmm.
speak. And so we carved that out because of that situation, because they do have collective bargaining.
Well, lastly, thinking ahead to the 2027 session, you're going to be one of, if not the most senior member in the chamber. And I'm curious what you're anticipating given all of the turnover this year, as well as the increase in very progressive members to the Assembly chamber.
I will be the second most senior member out of
Pretlow's got you?
150. Pretlow's got me by a
Hmm.
year. Um, we, I like to work with everybody. We will have a lot of new members. We're probably going to have at least 25 new members in the assembly next year. I mean, I haven't done all the math, but between the people who retired, the people who ran for other offices, the people who were defeated, um, it's going to be a lot of new people. Can that could be a good thing? It could be not a good thing. I don't, you don't want chaos, but I'm sure that by and large the people who were elected are smart and are going to be hardworking. So will as a group will the assembly be more progressive? Time will tell. You still need enough votes to pass bills, and we certainly want to do things in a smart way that benefits the people of our districts and of the state. But there'll be a lot of new people, a lot of new names to remember.
And there's
Just
also
so we know everybody, they change.
and there's also going to be a game of musical chairs as it comes to committee posts and leadership titles. Are you happy with codes, or are you going to be looking for a new title as well?
I'm very happy where I am. There aren't there aren't a whole bunch of other things I would even think of wanting. As long as the speaker is happy with me at codes, I'm happy at codes. I enjoy the work. I think we've accomplished a lot of good things. And I mean, I know other committees are opening up. Unfortunately, the transportation committee is opening up, the environmental conservation, agriculture, governmental employees, just to name a few.
Hmm.
There'll be a new majority leader because unfortunately Crystal is retiring as well. But we have plenty of good people to fill those positions.
Well, we've been speaking with Assemblymember Jeffrey Dinowitz. He's a Bronx Democrat. Assemblymember, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.